Good afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. And today we're going to talk with Dr. Mark J.R. Wakefield about his book, Successful Writing in English. Hi Mark.
Hello Shawn, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, and I want to thank Ariel for having us here.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Ariel as well. I've been working with them on some projects and also have done some teacher training and training events with them. And so I'm very pleased to be here with Mark so he can share some of his experience with us about writing in particular. I'm a teacher at International House Porto and a teacher trainer, so I really always am looking for ideas for writing, for getting students to do a little bit better in their exams and to be more successful in English. So Mark, I'm sure you're going to bring us a lot of ideas. You teach at the University of Wakefield University and Portucalense, correct?
Right, that's right.
Yes, and prior to that, you taught also in the UK, right?
So I've done academic English courses at university in the United Kingdom. I've also taught in a degree and master's level at the University of at the University of Queensland, in fact, and now. So I have quite a good experience in these kinds of things, and I have good appreciation of students' needs and concerns in terms of writing.
So all of these experiences, these different experiences, I suppose they've helped you compile a lot of things, get a lot of ideas together, and that you could then transfer into a resource?
That's quite true. Yes, I've seen that students have concerns and they have worries and they're quite stressed about lots of things. And I felt that it would be good for me to try to reduce their stress levels and empower them more by, for example, writing the book I have here. As it says, it's a practical guide, and I want them to be successful in writing English. Mm-hmm. So my idea is that if you give them the tools all in one place, not every tool, but the most important ones, I think, it will help them quite considerably to advance and to be successful in their writing, and I think that there's every chance that it's going to happen.
Great, I'm very excited about talking about this, and today our objectives, I guess, will be talking about tools for writing, right?
Yes.
Giving some examples, and also answering some questions. So we invite questions coming in so that we can ask Mark about this and get his viewpoints on that. So I guess the first question I really should ask you, Mark, is do people really still write? I mean, everybody talks about being in Zoom all the time nowadays. Phone calls still are not of style.
That's true.
So are people really writing?
Well, that's a very good question, because if you were to believe what you hear, people don't write anymore. But you do see that huge numbers of text messages are sent every day, billions. Emails, millions of emails every single day. Mm-hmm. People read the news and then they think about it and they comment on it. So they tweet and they share their ideas and their reflections about that on Twitter, on Facebook, on other social media platforms, Instagram, and so on. But you also then have the commercial purposes. Workers have to write reports, they have to write marketing documents, and companies expect that their employees have those skills, and if they don't, it's a serious handicap, serious problem for them. But most people now do find that there are important situations which you have to write in the right way.
Mm-hmm. So they talk about literacy being higher, but also writing is also more prominent and better, I suppose. I think it's important then that we think about when we're writing, it's not just transmitting a little message, throwing out some words, is it? It's about crafting our language into something a little more elaborate and more meaningful. Isn't that right?
That's quite true. Yes, I think there are certain standards that you have to follow and certain patterns you have to emulate. And that's what I try to do in the book, is to provide those standards and examples that students and teachers can use to reach that standard. So essentially, you're getting into a standard language that you might call register, and it would help to, for example, conventions and standards that you have to use in different disciplines. They're slightly different. Sometimes they're radically different. Mm-hmm. And there are ways of looking at how you can get to that standard and how you can alter what you've written towards something more suitable for the context.
Okay, so you're really focusing on context here.
Yes, very much so.
The words you choose maybe are important?
Yes.
The kind of tone that you transmit might be important?
Very much so. Well, that's the point of the register here, is that it demands a certain style of writing. So, for example, if I take an example, illustrate the point outside this book, but people know it. A quote from Shakespeare's sonnets in number 18, I think. It says, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?"
Mm-hmm. It's very famous one, yeah.
Beautiful little piece. That, for example, if you were to transform that, so the idea is you have sample texts, you have standards you can show and emulate and use to teach and to train. That can be adapted. So you could have something like...
You mean you'd adapt the words of Shakespeare?
It's possible to make some small changes. It's sometimes people say it's a hazardous thing to do, not a good idea, but you can change style a little bit for different purposes.
Okay.
So
keep the same ideas, but
keep
change
the same ideas, yes.
Okay.
Depending on context. So, for example...
Could you give me an example? Yeah.
Yes, certainly. I was coming to that, and what I mean is that you could say something, if you look at maybe a personal letter or an email between maybe lovers, you could say, it would then change to, "My dearest girlfriend, I would like to compare you to a summer's day in July." No, that changes it quite considerably.
That's quite romantic.
That's romantic, it's beautiful. So that allows a transmission of feeling, a physical description. So they're admiring physical appearance, the shape of their feelings from the way they talk to one another and share their ideas and their love. So that makes it very interesting.
And it's about appropriacy, right? Because
Yeah.
just repeating Shakespeare can be beautiful, but it's not necessarily appropriate in some context, right?
Definitely.
Okay. And so, while dressing it up, while making something change its appearance a little bit for a particular context, right?
Correct. I think, for me, language is about empowerment. So it helps people to describe their experiences, their feelings, their thoughts. And to do that well, I think, I might quote Samuel Johnson, who said, "Language is the dress of thought." And in that sense, I think he means, to me at least, is that we are the architects of our words, the style, the texture, the colour, the weight, if you like, the way we give the words how things function. So if we're able to control the nature of what's written, you control the type of message that is actually projected.
Okay, so give it a different appearance.
Absolutely,
Dress it up using the language of textiles in text.
Exactly, words themselves then become sort of like garments that the person will wear. So the text would wear different kinds of garments, if you like, and then it shapes the meaning in a different kind of way, depending on the terms you choose to deliver the message you want to deliver, or the impression you want to give the reader. That's quite important.
So by changing the register, we're kind of changing clothes, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. That's a good way of putting it.
Can you give us another example of how you might change that Shakespeare quote, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?"
Yes.
To another.
Yes.
context?
So we looked at a personal correspondence example, so the letter and email. You could then change it maybe to a report. So you could say something, again taking the first example and changing that a little bit. In this report, I shall examine the characteristics between a beautiful woman and a summer's day in July in English literature. So it creates a nice context for the analysis that comes after it.
Kind of really takes into account what the listener wants to hear, the reader wants to hear.
Yes.
I, as a teacher, am very happy to see in this report. So we have that formulaic language. We have that fixed phrase that we should use. Okay. So models are very important for that. But it seems then that you might be presenting some rules.
Yes, that's right. But I mean, for example, it depends very much on what you need to do. And there are times in which you have to go from one extreme to another. And if you don't have the skills, it's not possible to do that. So, as I said, I've come from the very descriptive, very flowery language of English literature towards report writing, and then you can go from there into maybe a thesis statement, so something of that kind. And those rules then are a little bit different. So you're looking at heavy analysis.
Yeah. But does that limit our exploration of ideas by having, rules, by having set boundaries, set phrases?
That's a valid concern and question as well. I don't think so. I think what you have essentially is, if I quote Wittgenstein, he says that the limits of my language are the limits of my world. So
that's quite broad.
It is, because if you don't have the tools to actually describe what it is you want to say properly, then you're creating a problem, a communication problem. So the issue that would then become in a more formal context is if you don't describe something properly, you can't analyze it properly.
Okay.
So it creates a situation whereby the better you describe it, the more amenable to analysis that information is. So then you create the value. But if you don't do it properly, it becomes a frustration. So it's empowering the reader to see this is how it should be written and what we can take from it. It creates a challenge. They need to understand what it is first before they can even analyze it. That's a barrier. So
that's interesting. To be on both sides of a situation,
yes.
To be able to write about it perhaps would also mean I can analyze it better.
Yes.
Or at least using those skills will help me unlock some things and become empowered. And I really like the idea of empowerment because I'm always trying to think about how I make my students be better and feel more successful. I guess that's part of why you put that in the title.
Yeah, the title is very much to do with that. To be successful, you have to embrace a range of strategies. We've looked at, in the beginning, we looked at this issue of English literature, fine piece of English literature, English words, written reports, and more formal text, thesis statements. But then you also need sort of written imagery, image in language. So that would involve bringing, I would say, people who want to move from analytical writing to creative writing, we do things like metaphors, I think, advice. So you could say something like, I have come a long way, or you have come a long way. And what you're getting at there are two
I
ways.
said that before to my students, by the way.
Yeah, I believe you. Absolutely. It's something that's an important tool to mention and a point to bring up because it brings in so many ideas at the same time. It's a great device. And I think that what you can say about that is you are referring to, in one instance, a physical distance that's been covered by the person. They've either done a long journey, come from far away, and have now reached where they need to be. And the challenge of the experience that they underwent during that process.
So really, literally, you're looking at this, okay?
Absolutely. Or you're looking at a person who has achieved very significant personal and professional development. So they've learned quite a bit more, now improved along the way throughout a given period of time, and so now they know a lot more about a particular area now at this present time than they did a comparable period in the past. So then
this idea of progression.
And accumulation of knowledge, of skills, of capacities. So I think that is also very important. That the tool exists that you can not only measure, but quantify and give it written shape.
Okay, so for the starter writer, they obviously can see how to get going on writing. But what about upping the game? What about making somebody, who's already a good writer like myself, I think, just be a little bit better? What kind of tips do you have in regards to that?
Well, I think they have to trust the strategies I've gone into in the book. For example, you have to be able to really try. Metaphors are very good, like I mentioned. You have to really try to use language and put it to work as much as you can.
Okay.
If you leave something out, if something is unclear, then something is missing. If something is missing, it's a deficit. What you want is a profit.
And the writer doesn't have things like, or the reader, doesn't have things like seeing facial expressions or anything like this to help bridge that gap of that. So clarity is really so important, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Now, let's go on to one area where you really have to be so clear, and that's, I understand theses are an area that you have to be so incredibly precise.
Quite true.
Could you take and adapt Shakespeare to that?
You could, yeah. For example, the original sentence I've looked at already, striking greatly to a summer's day, could transform. There's a number of ways you could transform that. Again, it's about adaptability. So you have to transfer the skill that can be used in different contexts, which is what I look at in the book here as well. It could be something of this thesis statement is concerned with analysing characteristics between a beautiful lady and comparing her to a particular day in July.
Poetic, but
still analytical.
Mm-hmm.
It's technical language, but it also serves a very particular purpose, as it must. If you don't do it properly, it fails. So the idea is to create the tools and the structures. And so not only do you have the tools are sharpened and they're used correctly, and then you get a meaningful product from that.
So would you need to put data in somehow into this equation?
Yes, you
because
would.
a thesis, I'm always thinking about quantifiable and ascertainable data.
Absolutely. There's an issue that come up all the time. So you would have to, for example, describe graphs and statistics.
Mm-hmm.
I do that in the book, and I give examples of how you can look at the overall trend or particular characteristics. You're not supposed to describe every single point in a graph or a diagram.
So you get lost in what's important, right?
Exactly. You're buried in detail instead of revealing the overall characteristics, the defining points rather than the individual intimate detail. And that can be a problem if you don't do it properly. So there are ways of exploring that, and I have strategies that explore what you should do in those situations, practice and emulating standards of how to do it.
You mentioned graphs and things. What about the language associated with graphs? Is that something that's important?
Yes. What you have is the language of change, really. So something is increasing, something is decreasing. There's stagnation, there's inflation or deflation. And you talk
depending on how impactful you want to be, right?
Exactly.
So if something plummets, you're really devastated, you're really worried.
Yes, that's true. And the choice of terms is important. So if plummets, you really want to emphasize that it's a dramatic reduction.
Mm-hmm. Can't be just a slight downward.
It's not a slight decrease or a decrease. It's much more than that. It's dramatic, and you want your readers to know that. So you write in that particular way to transmit that very specific message, and that's the point. Choose the right term to deliver the correct message.
So that's verbal, but at the same time creates a visual image, and I'm a quite visual person. Can you think of some other things that you have in the book that are quite visual that can help somebody, guide their writing?
Yes. I try to help people to think about before they write. You have to organize your ideas. If you can't organize your ideas, you will not get into
trouble. Yes,
you have serious problems if you can't do it. I try to remedy that issue before it becomes a significant barrier to writing. So you have these diagrams that I put in there that you can look at the main ideas, the support ideas, and supporting ideas and subordinate ideas. So the main idea, and you can work off from there. So what supports this, what happens because of that, consequences, results, and I show people how they can organize the information.
So in somebody's mind, they might have all of these ideas kind of swimming around, but then if they know where to plug them in,
correct,
they can get them in the right place.
Exactly, it helps to push the writer in the right direction, so it gives you structure rather than meaningful structure rather than scattered ideas. So bring it together, and then you have the basic structure of what your text is going to be. You begin to create a draft, which is what you need to start doing.
So bad news is always about a process that's about drafts and redrafts and final products. Okay, well, we can't get around that, can we?
That's quite difficult to do.
Okay. Well, here's a question that I have about writing, and that is oftentimes people do write for specific purposes such as exams.
Yes.
Do you think your tool is good for perhaps a Cambridge exam or another kind of exam, or is it? Do you think that those exams are based on real things? Because you've been mentioning to me that it's a real context, professional context often. Can this resource be used sort of for an exam?
I think so, yes, I believe so. I designed it and written in such a way that it brings in a lot of everyday continuing examples. So I ask people to look at a brief or letter. I said, these are the issues that you want. A letter of complaint, for example. These are the issues that are bothering you, or this is the problem. These are the points of the problem. And I give them an example of how you could write it. So it's a practical thing. If you have a very bad experience, for example, going to a shop, how do you complain? What would you write in there? How would you structure it? And I do that. I show them how to do that. How would you address the person? So I say, make sure you address the person properly, use the right address.
Yeah, because otherwise they will throw it away.
They'll throw it away.
They won't read it.
They won't even look at it properly. So due attention requires due diligence. And due diligence means writing correctly, in the right format and so on. So I look at that. So there are letters, there are emails as well, other kinds of documentation, so brochures and so on. So that it offers practical ways of saying, okay, this is my need, and here's my purpose, and I give them the form.
Okay, so there's always an example.
And solutions to exercises as I go along.
Okay, so you devote a lot of time to writing skills, it seems, giving examples as well. What about in terms of when you have some sort of argument, you have some sort of idea, how can you bring that really to life, so to speak? Not just make it formulaic.
I'm very happy you asked that question because it does make you think, because text on its own can be quite uninspiring for many people. And I think if you can bring it, as you said, bring it to life in some way, it becomes far more valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And I have tried to do that. I believe I've succeeded with people who make up their own mind, but I believe I have. I've looked at writing speeches, and so when you write a speech, you need to be read properly, and then those words will be turned into something lively, meaningful in oral form.
Mm-hmm.
And I've looked at, for example, the power of speech, but that's based on the skill of writing. And the context I've looked at is the case of a famous criminal trial in history.
Oh,
So it's very
captivating. That's very captivating.
It's interesting because it shows you, for example, if you can speak well and draft your speech properly, and you deliver the words meaningfully, clearly, and impactfully, what you have is, it can make a difference to someone's life in a very significant way. So if it's a criminal trial, if you're on the defense side, your client might get off.
Mm-hmm.
If on the prosecution side, you may succeed in convicting the person, they go to jail. So it can have a major impact, a significant impact. And the example I've given is a real one, and I give the results, so you can see what actually happened and the end result of what actually happened in the trial. So it's very practical.
It's a matter of life and death.
Yeah, in many cases it is. It sounds dramatic, but it's actually true. You know.
We have some questions here that have come up, and let's start off with the very mechanical one.
Sure.
Does the book have exercises and answer key per se?
Yes, it does. I was quite careful to make sure that it would have it. I have those things right throughout. So as you work along, depending on who's using it, sections, I explain how things should work, and I give practical examples, and then there are exercises to reinforce that knowledge, reinforce those practices and ideas and objectives. And then the solutions are given, so you can see this is where I am. You can check the progress as you go along. So I think it's important to get immediate feedback. You're not solely dependent on a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
You do the work, check us against the standards established in the book, and then check your answers against the answer you give.
I like how you say that, against what's given, because the writing is very individualistic. So what I write and what you would write would be different.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it.
Very
Many
personal.
speakers, but yet it would be very different.
Yes.
But having a model, I think, is important for me always, and just seeing how things would be structured in somebody else's mind or using their point of view.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So having an answer key is always important.
It's
Another question that's come up. I'm a secondary school teacher and my students find English exercises challenging. Will they be able to do the exercises you have included in the book? So we talked about native speakers. I think that's why they asked that.
That's of course. I would hope that teachers and standard students will buy the book. Yes, they can. They will be able for the exercises I put in there. But they need to be sensitive about it.
Okay.
How they approach it. Start with simpler, not simple, but the simpler, less challenging exercises first, and work their way towards the more difficult ones. I have done that in certain sections, in virtually every section. The first set of questions are less challenging, and they become progressively more difficult.
More involved, I
more
suppose.
involved,
Okay.
more extensive, and that builds skills and the appropriate competencies that you would need are then explored and built through those exercises as you progress through them. So yes, but they have to be graded.
Mm-hmm.
A graded approach. The teachers will be able to do this with them, and maybe older brothers, sisters, or other people who know about working together. It's absolutely possible, and I would encourage it.
So grading is an important concept of building up, one's challenge, I guess, as we go along. Are there other features that you think are important about the book?
Yes, I think that what it does do is take, for example, certain kinds of writing that you wouldn't normally see, I haven't seen in my own experience in other books, and bring them into content which shows you practical utility. So it's something you can use and you should use. So I have mentioned brochures, I've looked at other things as well. It's a purpose of marketing as well. I mean, lots of things I've done. So what I'm saying is that the examples I give are intended to be really practical. Mm-hmm. So not simply case of do it because you must, but do it because it will help you.
It would help you, okay?
So
Make
if
you
I-
feel empowered, as you said before.
That's not about empowerment for me. In the sense that language, it's not. It shouldn't limit it. So for me, the power of language shouldn't be limited by the nature and the magnitude of the person's imagination. Now, I think by going through a book like this, it will help you imagine more situations which English is not only practical but possible for you to use. So, and I give them the skills to actually go into those areas and go beyond themselves, so that when they limits the thing they might have, you could actually break them down and go far beyond where you thought you could go originally.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's that progression. You grade yourself, you begin one point and you walk forward. You go back to a metaphor, I've come a long way. So I think that people who use the book will come a long way if they study carefully and work through it. So they'll achieve quite a bit if they follow what they do in this book.
As a reference tool, what do you do in terms of vocabulary? And I, as a teacher, often have vocabulary lists.
Yeah.
How do you present that sort of
I give
research
tips.
language points that are really important? Maybe not language points, but I mean vocabulary that's important for particular purposes.
Yes, that's a valid issue, all right. But the one particular case I do examine is discourse markers and the language of transition. So moving from one section to another, one subsection or a different part of an idea.
Kind of warning the reader, oh, hey, I'm going to do this next
Exactly.
thing. Okay.
So it's a bit like signpost. Signposting is the idea. Signpost shows you where you're supposed to go. And if you see the sign, you know what to expect next, or it's an indication of where the journey is going to
You
change.
see the sequence.
Exactly. It creates the impression of how the sequence is structured. And I have a text that does that exactly that, and I highlight it in the text so you can see how it works and where it is.
Oh, so it actually gives you the roadmap in the
Exactly. So within again, it's highlighted in different colours so you can see how it works. And I explained before what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then students and anybody who wants to use it can actually follow those examples. And they're generally quite successful, I think, if people, particularly given the example I've given them, it's something that can be done. It's very practical.
Okay. And another thing of practical, when you say practical, I think about real life. What about, for example, I need to apply for a job? Do you tell somebody how to do something very practical like that?
Yes, I do actually. I talk about writing a CV and then an application for a job.
Oh, that's a tough one.
It's a very important skill, particularly in this economic environment. It can be quite uncertain. You need to be able to market yourself and your own skills very, very well. And if you can do it through English in the way I've shown you, it makes the person a valuable asset to that firm or company or organization. And I show you, for example, how you should address the letter, what you should talk about, and the way you should present your CV. So based on accepting international standards.
Giving them language and advice. Really.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so I guess this kind of all comes together, and we think about the whole register issue again.
Yes.
There, you've got the tone that has to be right? You've got the language that has to be right, the exact words that have to be right. You have, simple things like spelling and punctuation.
Yes, absolutely.
What else? We have to also think about structuring, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And the tone, you mentioned tone. What has happened, particularly with many sitcoms and media, things that are popular with people now, shows that they watch on television and so on. What you find is the standard has become very relaxed, very informal. But if you do that in the context in which it's not appropriate, it offend rather than empower. So I'm trying to highlight that in terms of register. Remember who you're writing to, what you're saying, and how you say it.
Yeah, I see that in my students a lot. They use the language they hear on television written down, and then I tell them, no, that's not quite right. Yeah. And they also seem to lack fixed phrases, which is another element of register that I'm always saying, you really try to use those fixed phrases so that you can communicate properly with me as a teacher. So it's a little bit too about that expectation of who's the reader, the target reader, who is it? So register, I guess, was one thing we talked about today.
Absolutely.
We talked about metaphors.
Yes. But I should also like to mention something else.
Oh, yes.
When in terms of register, it depends on tone and the context of writing. Of course, when you do that, you have to use appropriate spelling and punctuation.
Oh yeah.
If you can't spell and write correctly, it damages the message. It undermines the credibility of the writer, and you will disconnect the reader from what you're doing. So you have to respect those standards as well. That's a basic important thing. So I mentioned that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry to interrupt you.
No,
That is an important
it's
point.
good to have that written down somewhere to alert somebody who maybe hasn't really thought about it, that is so important, because we are writing more, as you've been saying. I guess now that I think about it, all these tweets and Facebook things, and it's acceptable there to have spelling errors or bad punctuation, but when you're getting down to something very much more practical, technical,
Correct.
that wouldn't fly, that wouldn't go. So what else have we talked about? Oh, also about examples, how examples are important
Yes.
for somebody who wants to write, and how having a tangible task where you sort of present the ideas and then have say, now it's your turn, why don't you try to write it? How that can be a good writing skill.
You're right. The issue I think that I really try to focus on is tangibility. Something real and something that you can actually use. I'm talking about in abstract terms. Give practical examples of form and style. And that I really tried to do that in the book. I think I've succeeded, but people will obviously make up their own minds.
And we talked about empowerment. So if you have something that's practical that somebody thinks they're going to be able to use in the future, I think they put more stock into the work they're doing.
Yes, they would. I think so.
And will, as a result, up their game or become much better.
Absolutely, I think so. Yeah.
And then last but not least, we've answered some questions. I think that was important to do. I know I feel good about having learned a little bit more about the area of register and how I can help students. And I don't know if the questions to you have been something for you to think about in maybe future books.
Helpful, definitely, because sometimes from the perspective of a teacher and a researcher, you have to continuously remind yourself about the place of the student or the learner. The learner can also be a teacher, but try to put yourself in the place of what they think and the situation they find themselves. So I've tried to do that in the book as well, and I think it does come across. But I do deeply appreciate questions, and I thank Alex as well for having us and giving me the opportunity to talk about what I want. So thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming and attending today. It's been a pleasure to be able to talk about this, and I hope we can do this again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you.